It's been 55 years since a Voting Rights Act was passed, but the voting rights of Black Americans is once again coming under attack. A 2013 Supreme Court decision has led to the disenfranchisement of thousands of voters across the country. That decision had a ripple effect, making it more difficult for people in low-income areas to cast their vote.
And we're just a month away from the general election. There's a concerted effort to dismantle the post office services, which some say is to hinder mail-in ballots specifically. Tonight, Craig Treadway has another report in our Created Equal series. And he's talking with two pioneers who worked tirelessly against voter suppression and how we lost so much ground in 2020.
In August of 1956, Ellerbe, North Carolina resident Henry Fry was about to get married, but he thought he'd make a stop first at Town Hall.
I decided that morning that before going to Greensboro, where we were to get married, that I would stop by the registration office and register to vote.
Fry, a former Air Force captain and college grad, was just about to enter the University of North Carolina Law School. But that day, none of that seemed to matter to the town clerk.
Why are you asking me these questions? I just want to register to vote, that's all. And he said, well, it's all in the book. So these are legitimate questions. If you don't answer the questions, you can't register.
Fry did get married that day, but did not register to vote. So in 1969, elected the year before as the state's first black lawmaker since Reconstruction, Fry was on a mission.
The first bill that I introduced was a resolution to abolish the literacy test as a requirement for voting in North Carolina.
Mrs. Fry picks it up from there.
2 years after Joey Johnson was there, Mickey Mashaw was elected, so there were three there, and they called themselves the Black Caucus.
And together, these three black lawmakers would work to strengthen North Carolina's voting rights. Now, 90 years old and retired, Mickey Mashaw says things changed in 2010.
When the Republicans took over in 2010 and 11, after we had passed all of the legislation that was needed, they began to work on eroding all that had been done.
10 years later, former President Obama once again sounding the alarm at Congressman John Lewis's funeral.
Even as we sit here, there are those in power who are doing their darndest to discourage people from voting by closing polling locations and targeting minorities and students with restrictive ID laws and attacking our voting rights with surgical precision.
But how, with the landmark Voting Rights Act passed in 1965, did we get here? The answer? A 2013 Supreme Court ruling in the case of Shelby County, Alabama versus Eric Holder's Justice Department. It basically took away the power of the DOJ to stop changes to voting laws that might be discriminatory, leaving states vulnerable with no oversight. Sean Morales Doyle with the Brennan Center for Justice says the decision in Shelby versus Holder had the subtle effect of a sledgehammer smashing open a swollen dam.
The restrictive discriminatory voter ID law went into effect immediately in Texas as soon as the decision came down. North Carolina acted to pass laws that the Supreme Court itself would later say targeted black voters.
Mickey Mashaw wasn't quite so eloquent about North Carolina's law.
I think my speech on the floor ended up with that they should take that piece of abomination and consign it to the streets of hell where it would never rise again.
In fact, a 2018 Brennan Center report concluded that previously covered states, 9 as a whole, and some townships and counties in 5 others, had purged voters off their rolls at significantly higher rates than non-covered jurisdictions, and had enacted laws and other measures to restrict voting. And as of 2019, 25 states had put in new restrictions on voting following the 2010 midterm elections, from voter ID laws to cutting down the number of days to vote, eliminating early voting, even more devastating, closing polling places, according to New York Congressman Hakeem Jeffries.
One of the tactics that we've seen adopted in the aftermath of the Shelby County versus Holder decision is that many states have closed down polling sites, which in most instances just so happen to be in low-income African-American communities and other communities of color.
In fact, the Leadership Council on Civil and Human Rights found that since the 2013 decision, nearly 1,700 polling places in 13 states have been closed, nearly 1,200 in southern states. States like Georgia, where 7 counties in that state now have only one polling place to serve hundreds of square miles.
As President Obama indicated during the funeral for John Lewis, we may no longer have to count the number of jelly beans in a jar, but they've just gotten more sophisticated in the effort to suppress the ability of certain communities to participate fully in America's democracy.
And the Trump administration continues to attack voting by mail as rife with fraud, with no evidence. That option important during the current pandemic. And of the 2 remaining members of North Carolina's original Black Caucus, Henry Fry retired as the state's first Black Supreme Court justice, as Chief Justice. And Mickey Mishaw retired after 43 years as a state lawmaker. And he still has little love for those attacking the voting rights he and his colleagues spent decades of their lives fighting for.
Like one Republican said to me at one time, "You want everybody to vote, don't you?" And I looked at him, I said, "Don't you?"
Yeah, such an important issue right now. We have Craig Treadway joining us now in studio with a bit more.
Yeah, let's talk about it, Craig, because many of these tactics are continuing just weeks before Election Day.
Yeah, that's right, Tamsin and Corey. First, let's talk about South Carolina. They're still trying to uphold their mail-in ballot witness law, whereas a person who wants to send in a mail-in ballot has to have that ballot witnessed by someone. A big problem there. And then the big ones, Florida and Texas. As you know, Texas Governor Greg Abbott just recently eased some voting restrictions, but under pressure from Republicans, he signed an executive order limiting each county to 1 ballot drop-off place. And I want you to put that into perspective. Harris County, 4.7 million people, 2.4 million voters, 1 drop-off box. Travis County spreads over 1,000 square miles. So it's not only African-American voting that's in jeopardy. It's elderly and others who can't get to these places.
Put it all in perspective. Yeah. All right, Craig, thank you so much.